На сегодняшний день мы видим, что
At present, we have the interpretation by some countries of the norms of international law. Based on their political convictions, political situation, the aggressive propaganda influenced the international terrorism, imperialism, against which quite a lot of generations of those countries fought. As a matter of fact, I want to remind you that UN was created on the basis of the Declaration of the United Nations. This is the Washington Treaty of 1942, in which two important points were fixed. The first is that the countries create a coalition that should defeat Nazi Germany, Japan and Italy, Hungary, Romania and others that have joined the Axis. And secondly, they create in the future a United Nations organization as an organization that will respect the basic principles of international law, human rights, etc. Moreover, the reform of the UN in this case should proceed precisely from the fact that now there is a need of joining the countries that support democracy, that support international law and civilized relations and human rights, and agree that they reset the system and will create either on the basis of the United Nations or something else. This organization should include only those who are ready to form understandable principles for everyone. The fact is that we can't wait for the end of the war. It is necessary to act now, because you see what Russia is doing. What Lavrov does, for example, he is on a business political tour around the world looking for some countries that are still ready to support Russia. For example, Latin America, Turkey and so on. These are all states that always vote with Russia at the UN General Assembly. Now we see the relationship between China and Russia. Iran and North Korea also support Russia. Now there is the formation of an alliance of an autocratic dictatorial states that challenge the democratic states. And this concerns not only Russian aggression against Ukraine, the Russian-Ukrainian war. This is a more global issue. The Chinese ambassador to France says the sovereignty after the collapse of the Soviet Union is not correct for some countries. Their independence, meaning Ukraine, Kazakhstan and so on, Iran also throws its might here. And don't forget about the position of Pyongyang or some other states like in Latin America or Africa. But at the same time, all the countries of the democratic camp, at least more than 100 countries, gathered at the Summit of Democracy, which was held recently. And I think that such summits of democracy and development need to be consolidated by introducing the idea of forming a new system of international relations. That is not just about reforming, but about resetting the UN. This is very important because we are now talking about reforming the UN. I'm not only about Ukrainian or American proposals for reforming the United Nations, there are Lavrov proposals in particular. Moreover, trying to play political games with those states that would like to support Russia, some states of Africa and Southeast Asia, for example. That is, such ideas are also promoting an agenda. But are we satisfied with such an option? I don't think so. President of Ukraine Zelensky announced at the end of the previous year that 2023 should be the year of strengthening our relations with the countries of the Global South. There are specialized deputy ministers in the Ukrainian foreign minister who deal with these issues. Now, as you know, a competition has been announced for ambassadors who should start working in African countries. And we are talking about the need to open more embassies, representative offices in South America. These are really very important things because we need to strengthen relations between the countries so that, firstly, our voices are heard there. If we are talking about the United Nations, which exists in that form in which there are quite a few countries presented from the African continent and from South America, and it is necessary to work with them in order to explain our position. It is very important. The second point is that the potential, as for me, was underestimated. The potential for cooperation in prospects means trillions. If you take the South American market, this is about 10 trillion. Africa is less than about 3 trillion, but nevertheless, these are the markets that cannot be overbooked. And we have to be there. In addition, it is necessary to understand that this is a very complex task, since we must work and explain and convey the position, including to some African countries or Latin American countries, that those states fought for independence in all time from imperial influences. They can now fall under the imperial influence of Russia or China, and that this brings new enslavement for them. That is, nothing good will come out of it in reality. Therefore, there are many opportunities. In fact, there is still quite a serious way to go through the opening of the Embassy of Representative Offices, but the fact that this method is correct, that is for sure. The European Union is the largest market. Let's be frank. If we cooperate with a single market, we offer the only rules, and not only the European Union, the US market, Canada, the Western community. This is all quite understandable. This is much more competitive than Russia. But let's examine some countries and examples. The Soviet Union pursued a similar policy. It has all been in history. It was only then that this policy in particular was directed at anti-imperial movements. Now Russia is pursuing an absolutely opposite policy and trying to pursue neo-imperial, trying to influence these same countries. In terms of level of influence and investments, the Soviet Union was far ahead of today's Russia. And what? How did the Soviet Union help to strengthen some kind of support among African countries, the countries of South America? None of this helped. Why? Because there were no competitive to that market and those conditions, and to the world that offered better conditions. And that's all. Today, the European Union and the United States, Japan, South Korea, and countries of Southeast Asia are ready to offer the best conditions. It's just more profitable. And those countries that still continue to live this way, look, Venezuela, what do you think they need? They are interested in preserving the Maduro regime and pay attention to what position the state is in. How do people live? Nicaragua, for example, or Cuba. In fact, these are the countries that Lavrov visited. Wonderfully, Brazil got there because they depend on fertilizers, minerals. But I think that this situation will be changed. You know, I just talked on the topic of the global south with a very famous Ukrainian diplomat, veteran Borshevsky, who in particular worked in Cuba. According to his recommendation, we need to change our embassy from Cuba to Guatemala, because the president of Guatemala is the leader of the state who visited Ukraine, met with President Zelensky and visited Bucha. And we must develop those points where we have quite serious prospects. We have them, of course, because we have started the right policy in this direction.